Hi guys, welcome back to At the Seams Patterns. Today's tutorial is for the Marley Babydoll Dress. I hope you find this tutorial helpful because this is a bit of a tricky one to sew. The Marley Babydoll Dress has been developed off the best-selling Amelia Puff Sleeve Dress. The Marley features a higher waist seam that sits under the bust. Lace-up detailing has been added to the back bodice, and the back of the skirt waist is elasticated to allow for the style to be fully adjustable. These updates make it the perfect maternity dress for that growing bump. The dress has been designed as both a normal dress and a maternity dress with two cut options for the front of the skirt. The bodice and the skirt are both fully lined, the sleeves are unlined. The sleeve is a set-in gathered puffy sleeve that is slightly more exaggerated than the Amelia dress. The skirt is a semicircular gathered skirt with a 5mm double-turned hem. The dress also features optional side seam pockets. To make this dress, you will need the following tools and materials: a paper pattern, the link will be available in the description box below, 2.3 to 2.9 meters of main fabric, 1.7 to 1.9 meters of lining fabric, 25mm elastic and 10mm elastic, thread to match, and ribbon, cord, or extra material to make the back loops and lace-up detail. You will also need scissors, pins, a sewing machine, an overlocker, an iron, a safety pin or bodkin, and a loop turner if you are using self fabric for the back lace-up detail. Cut all main and lining pieces accurately on the correct grain, ensuring all notches are clipped. Be sure to clip the centre front of the bodice hem and the centre front and centre back of the skirt waist. Please note seam allowance is marked on the pattern in a grey dashed line and is also listed on page 2 of the booklet provided. Take the main fabric pieces of the front bodice and pin the front panel seams right sides together and stitched closed using a 1cm seam allowance. Then press the seam allowance inwards. Then pin the side seams right sides together and stitch closed with a 1.5cm seam allowance, leaving a 1cm gap at the bottom edge. To ensure this is accurate, I recommend marking this on your fabric before sewing. Then press the seam allowance open. Take note of the 1cm gap left open at the bottom of the seam. Pin the shoulder seams right sides together and stitch closed with a 1cm seam allowance. Then press the seam allowance open. Then repeat steps 2 through to 4 on the lining fabric pieces. Next, you will need to prepare the loops for the centre back lace-up detail. This can be self-fabric roulette loops, ribbon or cord. For my dress, I decided on self-fabric loops with rose gold D-rings to make it a little more interesting. You will need 24 loops in total. Each loop will need to be 4 centimeters long. Once you have your loops made and cut, attach them to the bodice using the notches provided on the pattern. Then stitch in place to hold. Then place the bodice main and lining right sides together and pin along the back hem, centre back edges and front and back neck edges. When pinning the pieces together, ensure that your shoulder seams and front bodice seams match together. Stitch closed with a 1 cm seam allowance. Take care to ensure that your stitching starts and finishes exactly on the side seams. Then clip the corners and curves and turn through. Use a sharp object to get the corners nice and square, then press flat. Take notice of the difference between the front and the back hem at the side seam. At this stage, the front hem and the armholes will still be left open. This dress has optional side seam pockets. If you would like to skip the pockets, skip to step 15. Overlock the edges of the pocket bags separately from the wrong side of the fabric. Then, picking up the main fabric, front and back skirt pieces, pin the pockets to the side seams of the front and back skirt right sides together using the notches on the pattern as a placement guide. Stitched closed with a 1.5 cm seam allowance. Press the seam allowance towards the pocket and then understitch. Then overlock the side seams of the front and back skirt separately from the right side of the fabric. Then pin the front and back skirt side seams right sides together. Stitch closed from the top to the bottom, stopping at the pocket opening to sew around the edge of the pocket bag, then continue down the rest of the side seam. Seam allowance on the side seam is 1.5 centimeters and the seam allowance on the pocket is 1 centimeter. Then press the seam allowance and the pocket bag towards the front. Moving on to the skirt lining, pin the front and back skirt side seams right sides together. Stitch close with a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. Overlock closed, then press the seam allowance towards the back. If you have chosen not to add the side seam pockets, repeat step 15 on the front and back main skirt pieces. Hem both the main skirt and skirt lining with a 5mm double turned single needle stitch. Then stitch 2 rows of gathering thread across the top edge of the front of the skirt on both the main and the lining. Place the skirt main and the skirt lining right sides together. Place the bodice in between, ensuring the right side of the bodice is facing the main fabric of the skirt. Take care to use the notches provided to ensure the gathers are distributed evenly in the right areas. Gather the top of the front skirt main and lining to fit the bodice. Then pin the top edge of the skirt closed along the front and back waist edges. Take extra care to make sure that only the front hem is pinned into this seam. Stitched closed with a 1 cm seam allowance. Then gently remove the gathering threads from the front bodice. Take care not to unpick the seam stitching. If sewn correctly, only the front of the bodice will be inserted into the waist seam. Fold the garment the correct way and press the waist seam flat. The seam allowance should be enclosed between the skirt main and lining. Then add a top stitch across the back waist of the skirt, 10 mm from the top edge. The top stitching will start and stop at the side seams. This will make your back waist elastic casing. Using a safety pin or bodkin, thread the 10 mm elastic through the casing and stitch at the side seams to secure. Stitch in the ditch of the side seam to ensure the stitching is invisible. Moving on to the sleeves, run 2 rows of gathering thread across the top of the sleeve head between the front and back notches. Pin the sleeve inseams right sides together and stitched closed with a 1.5 cm seam allowance. Overlocked closed, then press the seam allowance towards the back. Be sure to repeat on the other sleeve. Turn each sleeve inside out, then using your iron, fold a 1 cm seam allowance at the sleeve hem, then fold again to make a 3 cm seam allowance. Hem each sleeve stitching 2.8 cm from the sleeve hem. Leave a 3 cm gap in the stitching to thread the elastic through. Thread the elastic through using a safety pin or bodkin. Secure the ends of the elastic together using a box stitch, then let the elastic shrink back into the hem. Then close the 3 cm gap following the stitching from the previous step. Pin the sleeve into the armhole right sides together. This is easier if the garment is turned inside out and the sleeves are the right way. Match the notches together at the shoulder seam, inseam, and front and back notches. Then use the gathering thread to gather the sleeve to fit into the armhole. Check that the gathers are even, then stitched closed. Overlock and press the seam allowance outwards. If your fabric is slightly thicker, you may need to press the seam allowance inwards. Lastly, lace up the centre back detail using ribbon, cord, or self fabric rouleau.